The thunder rumbled across the Montana sky as Olivia Neal clutched her 3-month-old daughter tighter against her chest, the tattered shawl doing little to shield the infant from the impending downpour. The stagecoach had left her at the edge of Promise Creek, a town that held no promises for her, just whispers and cold stares as she stumbled down the muddy main street with her belongings in one small carpet bag and a baby who had started to whimper with hunger. "Ain't no room at the boarding house for your kind," the proprietress had said, eyeing Olivia's lack of a wedding band and the baby in her arms. The saloon owner had laughed outright when she'd asked about work, his eyes crawling over her in a way that made clear what kind of employment he might offer. By sunset, with the first fat raindrops beginning to fall, Olivia had nowhere to go. The baby little Sarah began to cry in earnest, her tiny face scrunched and red as the cold wind whipped around them. "Lord have mercy," Olivia whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. She had come west with such hope after William's death, the letter from her cousin promising work and lodging. But upon arrival, she'd found her cousin had moved on months ago, leaving Olivia stranded in a town where a widow with no connections or worse, an unwed mother was unwelcome. The rain came harder now, and Olivia stumbled toward the edge of town, where a ramshackle church stood. Perhaps the minister would offer shelter, at least for the night. But the church door was locked tight, and no light shone through its grimy windows. "Madam?" a deep voice called from behind her. "Madam, you shouldn't be out in this weather." Olivia turned, clutching Sarah tighter as she faced a tall man on horseback. His face was partially obscured by the wide brim of his hat, but she could see a strong jaw covered in several days' growth of beard. His duster was sodden with rain, and beneath it she glimpsed the gleam of a gun belt. "I'm fine," she said automatically, though she was anything but. Pride was all she had left. The man dismounted, and as he came closer, Olivia could see his features more clearly. He wasn't young, perhaps 35, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years squinting into the sun. His eyes were a clear blue, regarding her with concern rather than judgment. "You don't look fine," he said bluntly. "And that little one doesn't sound fine either." As if to confirm his assessment, Sarah let out another pitiful wail. Olivia's voice broke. "I'm just looking for somewhere to stay the night. Town's not exactly known for its hospitality," the man said, his gaze sweeping over the darkened storefronts. "Especially to strangers." "I've noticed," Olivia replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into her voice. The man was quiet for a moment, studying her. Then he glanced at the sky, which opened up with another crack of thunder. "My ranch is about 3 miles out," he said finally. "It ain't much, but it's dry. 2 more chairs at my table tonight won't make a difference." Olivia stared at him, wary of his offer. She'd learned the hard way that men rarely gave something for nothing. As if reading her thoughts, he added, "You can have the spare room. I'll bunk in the barn if it makes you feel safer. But that baby needs to be warm and dry, and from the looks of it, you could use a hot meal yourself." Another gust of wind blew rain sideways into them, and Sarah's cries grew more frantic. "What's your name?" Olivia asked, trying to buy time to think. "Patrick O'Connor," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Most folks call me Pat." "I'm Olivia Neal," she replied. "And this is Sarah." Patrick nodded. "Well, Miss Neal, what do you say? That offer of shelter stands, but we ought to decide before we all drown standing here." Olivia looked at her daughter's miserable face, then at the locked church door, and finally back to the main street where not a single light welcomed her. What choice did she have? "Thank you, Mr. O'Connor," she said at last. "We'll accept your kindness." Without further discussion, Patrick led her to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently in the rain. He helped Olivia mount, passing Sarah up to her once she was settled, then took the reins and began leading the horse out of town. "Your bag," he said, reaching for her carpet bag. "Is this all you have?" "Yes," Olivia answered, embarrassed by how little she possessed. Patrick secured the bag to his saddle and continued walking, his long stride eating up the muddy road as they left Promise Creek behind. The rain was relentless, but true to his word, after about 45 minutes of trudging, the outline of a small ranch appeared through the downpour. A modest cabin with a front porch sat near a sturdy barn and corral. No fancy ranch house, but solid and well maintained. Patrick led them to the porch, then helped Olivia dismount, taking care not to jostle the baby who had, remarkably, fallen asleep despite the journey. "Let me get you inside before I see to thunder here," he said, unlocking the cabin door and pushing it open. The interior was simple but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a wooden table and 4 chairs nearby. A small kitchen area with shelves of provisions stood opposite, and Olivia glimpsed 2 doorways leading to what she presumed were bedrooms. "Make yourself comfortable," Patrick said, gesturing toward the fireplace where embers still glowed. "I'll be back shortly." As he disappeared into the rain to tend his horse, Olivia sank into a chair near the fire, relief washing over her. Sarah stirred in her arms, her little face peaceful now that they were out of the elements. Olivia loosened the blanket around her daughter and checked her for dampness, grateful to find her relatively dry beneath the layers of cloth. True to his word, Patrick returned within 15 minutes, his coat dripping as he hung it on a peg by the door. "Let me build up that fire," he said, moving efficiently to add kindling and logs until a cheerful blaze chased the chill from the room. He filled a kettle with water and hung it over the flames, then turned to Olivia. "You must be hungry." "I wouldn't want to impose," she began, but her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Patrick's mouth quirked up at one corner, not quite a smile, but close. "I've got stew from yesterday. It won't take but a few minutes to heat." He moved around the kitchen with surprising competence for a bachelor, retrieving a pot of stew from the cold box and setting it to warm on the stove. He cut thick slices of bread, placed them on a plate, and set the table for 2. "The spare room's through there," he said, nodding toward one of the doorways. "It's not fancy, but the bed's clean." "Mr. O'Connor," Olivia started. "Pat," he corrected. "Pat, then. I don't know how to thank you for this." He shrugged, looking almost uncomfortable with her gratitude. "No need for thanks. Couldn't leave a woman and baby out in that." He gestured toward the window where rain still lashed against the glass. They ate in relative silence, Olivia balancing Sarah in one arm while spooning stew into her mouth with the other. The food was simple but delicious, rich with beef and vegetables, and the bread was surprisingly fresh. "Do you bake?" she asked, surprised. Patrick nodded. "Man's got to eat. Learned from my mother before she passed." "It's very good," Olivia said softly. After the meal, Patrick showed her to the spare room, which contained a narrow bed, a small chest of drawers, and a rocking chair by the window. "The chair was my mother's," he explained. "Thought you might use it for the baby." Olivia's throat tightened at his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. There's a washroom off the kitchen," he added. "I'll get some hot water ready if you'd like to wash up." When Olivia emerged from the spare room after settling Sarah, she found a basin of steaming water waiting, along with a clean towel and a small piece of soap. "I'll be in the barn," Patrick said, already pulling his duster back on. "Lock the door behind me if it makes you feel safer." "You don't have to sleep in the barn," Olivia protested, feeling guilty about displacing him from his home. "I've slept in worse places," he replied with a shrug. "Get some rest, Miss Neal. Morning comes early on a ranch." With that, he was gone, leaving Olivia alone in the warm cabin. She did lock the door, more out of habit than fear of the quiet cowboy who had rescued her from certain misery. As she washed away the grime of travel, Olivia wondered about Patrick O'Connor. Why would a man like him, clearly self-sufficient and established, help a stranger and her child? Men in her experience always wanted something in return. Yet there had been no suggestive looks, no improper comments, just simple kindness. Perhaps, she thought as she climbed into the narrow bed beside Sarah's makeshift crib fashioned from a dresser drawer lined with blankets, there were still good men in the world after all. But Olivia knew better than to get her hopes up. Come morning, she would need to figure out her next steps. She couldn't impose on Patrick's hospitality for long, no matter how generously it had been offered. Dawn broke clear and bright, the storm having blown itself out overnight. Olivia woke to the sound of Sarah's hungry cries and the smell of coffee brewing. After feeding her daughter and making herself as presentable as possible in her wrinkled dress, she ventured into the main room. Patrick stood at the stove, frying bacon in a cast iron skillet. He'd obviously been up for hours. His hair was damp from washing, and he wore clean clothes, though they were as practical and worn as yesterday's. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Sleep well?" "Better than I expected to," Olivia admitted. "Thank you again for the shelter." He nodded, turning back to the stove. "Coffee's ready if you want some. Breakfast in a few minutes." Olivia settled Sarah in the crook of her arm and poured herself a cup of coffee with her free hand, marveling at how routine this felt, as if she and Patrick had shared many such mornings. "I was thinking," Patrick said as he slid eggs onto plates alongside the bacon, "that you might want to stay a few days. Get your bearings." Olivia stared at him. "I couldn't possibly, look," he interrupted, placing the plates on the table and gesturing for her to sit. "I don't know your story, and you don't have to tell it if you don't want to. But Promise Creek isn't exactly welcoming to newcomers, especially." He trailed off, his eyes flickering to Sarah. "Especially unwed mothers?" Olivia supplied, her chin lifting defensively. "I'm a widow, Mr. O'Connor." Patrick had the grace to look abashed. "I didn't mean to presume. But it doesn't matter to folks in town either way. They're a judgmental lot." He was right about that. Olivia had seen the contempt in their eyes when she'd arrived yesterday, heard the whispers as she'd walked down the street with Sarah in her arms and no husband at her side. "What I'm saying," Patrick continued, "is that you need time to figure out your next steps. I've got the space, and truth be told, it's nice having someone else around besides the horses and cattle." Olivia studied him as she ate, trying to discern his motivation. Patrick O'Connor was not a handsome man in the conventional sense. His face was too weathered, his nose slightly crooked from what had likely been a break, and his hands bore the calluses and small scars of a lifetime of hard work. But there was something undeniably appealing about his straightforward manner and quiet strength. "Why are you helping us?" she asked finally. Patrick considered the question as he chewed a piece of bacon. "My mother always said to judge a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him," he said at last. "Guess I'm trying to live up to that." It was such a simple answer, yet it rang with sincerity. "I can work," Olivia offered. "I'm not afraid of hard labor, and I can cook and clean to earn our keep." Patrick nodded. "Fair enough. I won't say no to home-cooked meals. Been eating my own cooking too long." And just like that, an arrangement was made. Olivia would stay for a week, helping around the house while she decided on her future plans. Patrick would continue his ranch work, giving her and Sarah space and safety. The first few days established a rhythm. Patrick rose before dawn to tend to his livestock, a modest herd of cattle and several horses, while Olivia prepared breakfast. They ate together, Patrick entertaining Sarah with gentle faces that occasionally coaxed a gummy smile from the infant. Then he would return to his outdoor chores while Olivia tackled the cabin. She found the work therapeutic. The simple act of sweeping floors, washing clothes, and preparing meals gave her purpose. The cabin, while tidy, showed signs of a bachelor's priorities, functional but lacking in comfort. Olivia rearranged furniture to create more open space, hung the freshly laundered curtains so they draped more evenly, and discovered wildflowers growing near the creek that she placed in a mason jar on the table. Patrick noticed these small changes but made no comment beyond a nod of appreciation when he came in for supper to find the cabin more welcoming than it had been in years. On the fourth day, as Olivia hung laundry on the line behind the cabin, Sarah nestled in a basket nearby, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Instinctively, she scooped up her daughter, heart racing as she retreated toward the cabin door. A rider appeared around the corner of the house, a young man barely out of his teens with a friendly face and straw-colored hair. "Oh!" he exclaimed upon seeing her. "Beg pardon, madam. I'm looking for Pat O'Connor. He's out checking the north pasture," Olivia replied, relaxing slightly but keeping Sarah close. The young man dismounted, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm Tobias Wilson, work over at the Reynolds place. Just needed to talk to Pat about some strays we found with his brand." "He should be back soon for dinner," Olivia said. "You're welcome to wait if you'd like." Tobias shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Olivia and the baby. "That's mighty kind, but I'll come back later. Didn't know Pat had company." The way he said company made Olivia's cheeks burn. She recognized the assumption in his tone. "I'm just staying temporarily," she said stiffly. "Mr. O'Connor has been kind enough to offer shelter while I make arrangements." Tobias nodded, though his expression remained dubious. "Well, please tell him I stopped by." As he rode off, Olivia's good mood evaporated. The encounter was a stark reminder that her presence at Patrick's ranch would be fodder for gossip. She was potentially damaging his reputation by staying here, unmarried and with a child. When Patrick returned for the midday meal, Olivia relayed the message from Tobias, watching his face carefully. "I'll ride over to Reynolds this afternoon," he said, seemingly unconcerned as he washed up at the basin. "The young man seemed surprised to see me here," Olivia ventured. Patrick dried his hands on a towel, his expression unreadable. "I imagine he was. I'm worried about your reputation," Olivia blurted out. "People will talk." Patrick's mouth quirked in that almost smile. "People always talk. Not much happens in these parts, so they make their own excitement. But having an unmarried woman staying in your home, you're a widow with a child who needed help." Patrick interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "Anyone who think poorly of either of us for that isn't worth worrying about." His defense touched something in Olivia that had been closed off since William's death. This man, who owed her nothing, was willing to stand against social censure to help her and Sarah. That evening, after Patrick returned from the Reynolds ranch, he brought in a small wooden cradle. "Mrs. Reynolds had this stored in her attic," he explained, setting it down. "Her youngest is nearly 12 now, so she said you could have it." Olivia ran her hand over the smooth wood, noting the careful craftsmanship. "It's beautiful. Might be more comfortable for the little one than a drawer," Patrick said, a touch of humor in his voice. "Did you tell them about us?" Olivia asked cautiously. Patrick nodded. "Told them you were my late cousin's widow, come west to start fresh. Said I offered you a place until you get settled." The lie was meant to protect her, Olivia knew, but it stung nonetheless. Even in his kindness, Patrick recognized that the truth that he'd taken in a complete stranger would invite more speculation than a family connection. "Thank you," she said softly, though the words felt inadequate. That night, after Sarah was settled in her new cradle, Olivia sat with Patrick on the front porch, watching as the sunset painted the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "It's beautiful here," she murmured. "It is," Patrick agreed. "Worked for other ranchers for 15 years before I saved enough to buy this place. It's small, but it's mine." "You've never married?" The question slipped out before Olivia could stop it. Patrick was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. "Was engaged once," he said finally. "To a girl from back east who came out to teach at the school in Willow Bend. Elizabeth was her name. She took sick with fever in her first winter. Didn't make it to spring." "I'm sorry," Olivia said, recognizing the old pain in his voice. "It was a long time ago," Patrick replied. "Nearly 10 years now." Olivia understood loss all too well. "My husband died in a mining accident in Pennsylvania," she offered. "I was 7 months along with Sarah when it happened." Patrick nodded, not pushing for more details but giving her space to continue if she wished. "We'd been married just over a year," Olivia went on, surprised at how easy it was to speak of William to this quiet man. He was a good person. Worked hard. When he died, his family blamed me, said I'd distracted him, made him careless. They wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. That's why you came west? My cousin Abigail wrote that I could stay with her in Promise Creek, that she'd help me find work. But when I arrived, I learned she'd moved on to California months ago. Olivia sighed. I had just enough money for one night at the hotel, but when they realized I was alone with a baby and no husband in sight, they refused me a room. And that's when I found you. Patrick finished. Yes, Olivia said. Standing in the rain with nowhere to go. They sat in companionable silence as the first stars appeared. Olivia was acutely aware of Patrick beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. The week's almost up, Patrick said after a while. Have you decided what you'll do next? Olivia had been dreading this question. The truth was, she had no plan, no prospects, and barely enough money to purchase stagecoach tickets to another town that might be just as unwelcoming. I'm not sure, she admitted. I thought perhaps I might try Willow Bend or Prosperity. Somewhere larger than Promise Creek, where I might find work as a seamstress or cook. Patrick nodded slowly. Those are possibilities, he agreed. Though Prosperity's not much more welcoming than Promise Creek, just bigger. Another silence fell, this one heavier with unspoken thoughts. Or you could stay, Patrick said at last, his voice so low Olivia almost missed it. Her heart stuttered. Stay? Patrick turned to face her, his expression serious in the gathering dusk. I know it hasn't been long, and I'm not asking. That is, I'm not presuming anything. But the cabin's more a home with you and Sarah in it. And I've got enough land and cattle to support a family. Are you offering me employment? Olivia asked, needing clarity. No, Patrick said firmly. I'm offering you a choice. You could stay as long as you need, no strings attached. Or if you were so inclined, we could consider a more permanent arrangement. In time, he added hastily. When you've had a chance to know me better. Olivia's breath caught. Are you proposing marriage, Patrick O'Connor? Pearly, it seems, he replied, a self-deprecating smile tugging at his mouth. I'm not asking for an answer now. Just asking you to consider staying. Getting to know each other. Seeing if there might be something worth building here. The honesty in his eyes undid her. This wasn't a proposal born of passion or even infatuation. They'd known each other less than a week. It was something more practical yet no less meaningful, a recognition of compatibility, of mutual respect, and perhaps the seed of something that could grow into love. I'll consider it, Olivia said softly. Patrick nodded, clearly relieved she hadn't rejected the idea outright. That's all I ask? The next morning, Sarah woke earlier than usual, her cries pulling Olivia from a dream-filled sleep. As she nursed her daughter in the rocking chair, watching the first hint of dawn lighten the eastern sky, Olivia contemplated Patrick's offer. She had come to appreciate his steady presence, his quiet competence, and his unfailing kindness. There was no passionate declaration of love, no whirlwind romance, but perhaps those weren't the foundations of lasting happiness anyway. William had courted her with poetry and promises, sweeping her off her feet in a romance that had left her widowed and alone before her 21st birthday. Patrick offered something different, security, respect, and the possibility of affection growing into something deeper. For herself, Olivia might have chosen independence, taking her chances in another town. But for Sarah's sake, the promise of a home, a father figure, and stability was compelling. When Patrick came in from his morning chores, Olivia had breakfast waiting as usual. But today, she had also packed her carpet bag and placed it near the door. Patrick noticed it immediately, his face falling before he could mask his disappointment. You've decided then? I have, Olivia confirmed, setting a plate of eggs and bacon before him. I've decided that I'd like to stay. For a while. To see if what you suggested might be possible. Relief flooded Patrick's features. You had me worried with that bag by the door. I packed it to remind myself that I have a choice. Olivia explained. That I'm staying because I want to, not because I have nowhere else to go. Patrick nodded, understanding in his eyes. Fair enough. And you can change your mind any time. I know, Olivia said with a small smile. That's part of why I'm choosing to stay. As summer turned to autumn, Olivia and Patrick established a routine that worked for them both. She managed the household and garden, occasionally riding with him to check on cattle when Sarah was napping, watched over by Mrs. Reynolds, who had become a frequent visitor and ally. Patrick worked from dawn to dusk, but always made time to play with Sarah, whose adoration for the tall cowboy was evident in her delighted squeals whenever he entered the room. Their relationship evolved gradually, built on shared meals, conversations on the porch at sunset, and the daily rhythm of ranch life. Patrick never pressed for more than Olivia was ready to give, but his growing affection was evident in 100 small ways: the wildflowers he'd bring home, the way he'd linger at the table after dinner to talk, the gentle brush of his hand against hers when passing the coffee. By the time autumn's chill hinted at the coming winter, Olivia realized that what had begun as an arrangement of convenience had transformed into something far deeper. She found herself watching for Patrick's return, her heart quickening at the sight of him riding toward the cabin. She noticed the way his eyes sought hers across the room, the tenderness in his expression when he thought she wasn't looking. It was on a crisp October evening, with the aspen trees blazing gold against the mountains, that Patrick finally kissed her. They had walked to the creek after supper, Sarah bundled in a shawl and sleeping in Olivia's arms. The conversation had meandered from practical matters, winter preparations, livestock concerns, to more personal revelations about hopes and dreams. I never thought I'd have this again, Patrick admitted as they paused to watch the sunset reflect in the creek's clear water. A chance at happiness. Olivia shifted Sarah to her other arm, stepping closer to Patrick. Nor did I, she confessed. After William died, I thought that part of my life was over. Patrick turned to face her, his expression solemn yet hopeful. And now? Now I think perhaps it was just beginning, Olivia replied softly. Patrick reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Olivia, he said, her name almost a prayer on his lips. May I kiss you? The tenderness of his asking brought tears to her eyes. Yes, she whispered. His kiss was gentle, respectful, yet filled with unmistakable emotion, not the impetuous passion of youth but something deeper, more enduring. When they parted, Olivia felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, like a key turning in a long-locked door. I think I'm falling in love with you, Patrick said, the words plain and honest as the man himself. Olivia smiled through her tears. I think I might already be in love with you. Their wedding took place in mid-November, a simple ceremony at the church in Willow Bend where the minister was more welcoming than those in Promise Creek. Mrs. Reynolds organized a small celebration afterward, and a few neighboring ranchers attended, bringing practical gifts and well wishes. That night, after Sarah was asleep in her cradle, moved now to a small adjoining room that Patrick had built onto the cabin, husband and wife came together with a tenderness that belied their relatively brief acquaintance. In Patrick's gentle hands and reverent kisses, Olivia found a passion she hadn't known was possible, a connection that went beyond the physical to touch something profound within her soul. Winter brought heavy snow that isolated the ranch for days at a time, but the cabin was warm and well stocked. Olivia and Patrick used the enforced intimacy to deepen their bond, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their future. Sarah grew stronger daily, beginning to crawl and babble, her sunny nature brightening even the darkest winter days. By spring, Olivia knew she was expecting their child. When she told Patrick, his weathered face transformed with a joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. A baby, he said in wonder, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. Our baby. Another chair at the table, Olivia replied with a smile, remembering his words from that rainy night nearly a year ago. Patrick gathered her close, his arms strong and secure around her. From 2 extra chairs to a full table, he murmured against her hair. Who would have thought a rainstorm could bring such blessings? As Olivia leaned into his embrace, Sarah crawling happily at their feet, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in Promise Creek a desperate widow with a baby and no welcome, only to find that sometimes happiness waited just beyond the town limits, in the form of a quiet cowboy with room at his table and in his heart. By the time their son was born in late autumn, a strong, healthy boy they named William Patrick, the O'Connor ranch had prospered. With the proceeds from a successful cattle sale, Patrick had expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom for Sarah and a nursery for the baby. The original spare room where Olivia had first stayed now served as a sewing room, where she made clothes for the growing family and occasionally for neighbors who commissioned her skilled work. 5 years after that rainy night when Patrick had found Olivia stranded in Promise Creek, their homestead had transformed. The once bachelor cabin was now a proper home, with curtains at the windows and children's laughter echoing from the yard. Sarah, now a spirited 5-year-old with her mother's auburn hair and her stepfather's blue eyes, a coincidence that often led strangers to assume she was Patrick's natural daughter, had been joined by not only William but also 2-year-old Margaret. On the anniversary of their meeting, Patrick and Olivia made it a tradition to sit on the porch after the children were asleep, watching the stars emerge above the mountains. "I was so afraid that night," Olivia admitted, her head resting on her husband's shoulder. "Afraid of you, afraid of the future, afraid I'd made a terrible mistake coming west." Patrick's arm tightened around her. "And now?" Olivia tilted her face up to his, eyes shining in the lamplight spilling from the window. "Now I know it was the best decision I ever made. Even the hardest parts led me here, to you. 2 more chairs at my table," Patrick mused, quoting himself from years ago. "Little did I know those chairs would multiply." "Do you regret it?" Olivia asked, already knowing the answer but wanting to hear it anyway. Patrick looked out over the land they had nurtured together, then back to the woman who had brought such unexpected joy to his life. "Not for a single moment," he said, and sealed his words with a kiss that promised many more years of happiness to come.